citizens of the world. Once again, it's Michael James, and I'm here with another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. And, we originate out of the 49th Ward in Chicago, but I'm not there. I'm in Hawaii. I'm in Honolulu. I'm up high. I'm looking out. You can see the Diamond Head. I'm out here after many years of saying I was going to come to Hawaii. It's the 49th state I visited, and I'm actually having a pretty good time. I took a ride with my friend Mike McGraw Piranha. Many of you may know him from the Piranha Brothers that were long in Chicago, but he's been out here for years doing music. And we took a long ride yesterday. We went up to the North Shore. We stopped at a place called Ted's and got some chocolate cream pie to bring home. We visited towns along the way. We stopped at a beach and where the turtles are laying their eggs. And I think we'll put some pictures of that over. It was really wonderful to watch. There were a lot of tourists in the area, but not on the beach that we were at. And it was interesting to watch people taking pictures of them and being wowed by these turtles doing their sluggish, slow trip back into the water. I myself got into the Pacific this morning and I'm all dried out, and I've been waiting to do this segment of this week's Live from the Heartland for March 23rd on the election results out of Chicago. So far, I know that the state's attorney's race has yet to be called, so I really can't report on that. By the time you watch this show on the 23rd, you will know who won that race. Unfortunately, and one of the saddest things for me is Bring Chicago Home did not pass. I don't think other political people and politicians around the city put in as much energy as the Network 49 people and the Democratic Party in the 49th Ward. Bring Chicago Home was a way to really deal with homelessness. Homelessness is a real critical situation, not only in Chicago, but around the country. We saw that the real estate interest put up a lot of ads linking immigration, crime, and everything to the mayor's attempt to raise more money through the transfer tax on buildings over $1 million. This is not an issue that's going to go away. I think people will try it again. It's been happening in other cities, and I'm really disappointed with that. We had a really low voter turnout in Chicago, close to 20%. Not good. There is an election looming in November, and we have to do much better at that. The rest of the show will be devoted to two things, both very good. Flint Taylor, longtime activist political lawyer out of the People's Law Office, is going to report on the most recent settlement with the county and what waits with the city around the Burge torture cases and the Jackie Wilson case. You'll hear more about that from Flint. And Cadien Lake James, who happens to be my youngest son, is just back from Bali and Hanoi with a new record release. He's going by the name of Lake J, and his new album is called Dizzy, and he'll fill us in on that and a few other things. And I want to wish him a happy birthday. I won't be there for your birthday, son. I'm going to still be out here in Hawaii, but the 23rd, when this show goes live in public, that is your birthday and you're turning 30. So everybody enjoy the show. Get ready. We're going to hear some music. We're going to hear some good political information. And I'll be back next week with another edition of Live from the Heartland, which we'll record out here in Hawaii. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland. This is for the week of March 23rd in the year 2024. And I'm still Michael James, and it really gives me a lot of pleasure to bring on our next guest for this segment of Live from the Heartland, a longtime friend, Flint Taylor, a progressive lawyer who goes back, along with me and a bunch of other people still around, to the days of the Rainbow Coalition with the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords Organization, the Young Patriots Organization, and Rising Up Angry. He is the author of a really wonderful book called The Torture Machine. And he is a man who was on the scene just after Fred Hampton was assassinated by the Chicago police and the FBI. He worked on that case. He worked on the Attica prison case. And for many years, he's been involved with the Burge torture case. He's been fighting for justice from courtrooms here in Chicago all the way to the Supreme Court. And this week, I got an email both from Flint Taylor and also from Andy Thayer talking about a joint statement on behalf of Jackie Wilson by his lawyers. Flint, why don't you tell us what that says? And good morning to you,
Good
or
morning.
afternoon.
And we do go back that far.
We do.
That's a ways back these days, isn't it?
It's getting to
Um,
be.
it is. It's great to be with.
Thankfully, we're still here.
Yeah, yeah. It's great to be with you. Yes, it was a really good day for Jackie Wilson on Wednesday and Thursday of this week when the county board approved a record-making $17 million settlement for their role, that being the state's attorney of Cook County's role in his torture by Burge and the 36 years he spent in the penitentiary after being wrongfully convicted for the killing of two Chicago police officers. And that's the statement that we and the Lovey firm put out jointly because we jointly represented Jackie in his civil rights suit over the last actually, let's see how long it's been. We've represented Jackie since 2015. I was involved along with some of my partners in the initial Wilson case, that being Andrew Wilson's case, who was tortured along with his brother Jackie. And I got into that case in the mid 80s. So this is a case that has been going on as kind of the centerpiece of the Burge torture scandal and our involvement in it to fight against torture and to expose it now for 35, 37, 38 years.
Well, Flint, for the people who may not know, although if you live in Chicago and you're older, you might remember when the Wilson brothers were involved in an altercation and chased by the police. There was a lot of fanfare and, up to the minute reports of that. Both of them, I believe, went to prison. Tell us more about the origin of this case, as well as filling us in on who John Burge is.
Okay. Well, back in February of 82, the Wilson brothers, that being Andrew Wilson and Jackie Wilson, were stopped on a South Side street by two white gang intelligence officers. Andrew Wilson had a gun on him and also was in violation of his parole or probation. And one thing led to another. And while Jackie stood by, his brother Andrew shot and killed two white Chicago police officers. They then fled. And of course, the entire Chicago Police Department and the power structure in the city of Chicago and Cook County completely lost their mind in trying to find the perpetrators. And they terrorized the Black community. They kicked down doors, they tortured people, they beat people, and finally they landed upon Jackie and Andrew. And they took them to Area 2, which was at 91st and Cottage Grove here in the city, a detective headquarters that Burge was the head of violent crimes. Now, Burge wasn't just any Chicago police officer. He was an officer, he was a lieutenant at that time, who had for the previous 10 years headed up a crew of what they called themselves Burge's ass kickers. And they utilized not only the traditional forms of brutality and questioning suspects, Black suspects, but they used very serious torture techniques, electric shock, suffocating people with bags and typewriter covers, sticking guns in their mouth, and simulating a mock execution, beating with rubber hoses, you name it, they had all those tactics. And they used all of them on Andrew and Jackie Wilson. They got confessions. The confessions led to the convictions of Andrew and Jackie. Andrew was sent to death row and Jackie got a life sentence. A few years later, Andrew filed a pro se lawsuit from prison alleging he was tortured. By this time, the Supreme Court of Illinois had overturned his conviction because of his torture, and he ended up being tried again and getting two life sentences. We came into Andrew's case at that point, and we started to uncover the fact that it wasn't just Jackie and Andrew that were tortured, but it was a whole pattern and practice of police torture. And that, of course, over the next 35 years has led to many struggles, many battles, both in the courtrooms, on the streets, not only by the lawyers, but also, of course, by movements, by the families of the survivors of torture, by the torture survivors themselves from prison. And so ultimately, after 2 trials, we were able to get a judgment for Andrew Wilson back in the 90s. And then many years later, after the city council decided to give reparations to the men who had been tortured, and that's a whole story in and of itself. Then Jackie's case was returned back to the courts. And so that's where we were able to establish that his confession was tortured out of him. We got a new trial. At the new trial, we ultimately forced the prosecutors to dismiss the case, and the judge granted Jackie a certificate of innocence back in 2020. This allowed him to go to federal court and to sue all the people who had wrongfully convicted him and who had tortured him. And as a result of that lawsuit, Cook County, and specifically, it's my understanding or belief, Tony Preckwinkle and Kim Fox owned up to the role that the prosecutors had in the torture and wrongful conviction of Jackie Wilson over these many years, which was unbelievable, really almost unbelievable in terms of how deep and widespread it was. And that's where the settlement came in terms of the county of Cook. Now, we still have the case pending against the city of Chicago, and so far, the Johnson administration has been very disappointing in how they have been dealing with torture cases, including and most particularly Jackie's case. And we're hoping there'll be a sea change within the administration to recognize in court what they've recognized out of court politically, which is that Burge and the city had this longstanding pattern and practice of police torture, and that the men who were tortured should be properly compensated for that.
So is the $17 million settlement, who does that go to, besides probably some lawyers?
Oh, it doesn't, it goes to Jackie.
Yes.
Yeah, it goes to Jackie. Certainly will be compensated for all the work we put in over these many years. But it is a fair settlement in terms of what the county involvement was, the state's attorney's involvement, starting with Richie Daley and starting with the prosecutor who was in Area 2 and participated with Burge in making sure that Jackie and Andrew were tortured, and then was involved in the cover-up. And it goes all the way, Mike, to the present day, when one of the prosecutors of Jackie came into the trial, the third trial, the one we had in 2020, and committed perjury in terms of an informant that he had used in the second trial back in the 80s, and where he was covering up the fact that this informant he still had a relationship with him, and that the informant was still alive in England. It's quite a story. It's a story that certainly could be thought to be fiction, but it's actually truth is sometimes stranger than fiction, particularly when it comes to Chicago police and Cook County prosecutors.
Well, Flint, there was a lot of back and forth with a lot of congratulations and yays, and, this was a great decision. How big a victory is this, and what are its ramifications?
Well, it certainly is an important victory, because for the first time, it really recognizes how deeply involved the state's attorney's office, that meaning the Daley regime, and then subsequently the Devine regime, and after that, the Alvarez machine and regime. And to some degree, not Kim Fox herself, but some of her underlings were also at the very end, trying to, if not cover up, to certainly minimize the exposure that the state's attorney had. But the recognition that's now made with this number, which I believe is a record-setting settlement in torture cases. And as I said, it's only about half of what Jackie should get because he did 36 years in the penitentiary, and a good round figure is $1 million a year for being wrongfully convicted. And so if you do the math, that means the city owes about $20 million on this case. And we're hopeful that they'll step up and do right with regard to their share of the involvement, given Burge and his notorious record as a torturer in Chicago.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about Jackie Wilson. How is he doing? I mean, he's been in prison for 36 years. I don't know what his situation is now, but you obviously are in touch with him. Can you talk a little bit about how he is?
He's, it's not easy. You're in prison, you live a certain prison life for 36 years. You come out, much of his family no longer is around. He's got to look over his shoulder all the time because this is such a notorious case. And he has been lumped with his brother, even though he really did nothing in terms of shooting the officers. In fact, all the evidence showed that he stood by in total shock when his brother shot the two officers. But nonetheless, he took the rap along with his brother. But so he's carrying that around with him. And even though the reports now say he was exonerated, you see the right-wing pushback. That horrible paper, The Wire, the Daily Wire, you've probably seen it. Some of the prosecutors and also the family of the deceased officers and the police foundation, which former Superintendent Klein heads up, they all made statements calling him a murderer, even though he has been fully exonerated and been found by the courts to be innocent. So this is what he has to put up with on a daily basis. But he's stayed out of prison now since 2018. He's doing, well, even though he's up against all of this. And of course, this is going to be a complete life-changing amount of money that he's going to get. And obviously, we will help him to make sure that it's properly cared for. But there's no amount of money, as you know, Mike, that can compensate you for being tortured and spending 36 years in a maximum security prison. He almost died at one point. He went on a hunger strike because they took all his legal materials away. And so we saw him at one point in a wheelchair. He wasn't, but he has come back from all of that. Obviously, when you come out of prison and not having real health care for 36 years, you're going to come out with health issues. I'm sure that his lifespan has been shortened by that span in prison. But all in all, he's doing very, very well. And, we always, with our clients who come out after being wrongfully convicted and being tortured, we marvel at how much strength they have and how much resilience they have and how much fight they remain to have despite all the beatdown that they've suffered over all these years.
Well, Flint, let me ask you one more question. You've been on this for a long time about torture, and we assume that there's been torture in police stations, not only in Chicago beyond the Burge cases, but certainly in other parts around the country. Can you just address a little bit the torture phenomena and how it is kind of built into police departments, perhaps around the country, particularly at a time when we've seen a lot of reforms around police behavior that are now being pushed back against, as you just mentioned?
Well, there's torture and then there's torture. And the torture we saw here in Chicago was likened to the torture you'd see in Vietnam during the Vietnam War against Vietnam prisoners of war and civilians. And of course, Burge brought those tactics of electric shock, of dry submarino, of mock executions back from Vietnam. And that is, I wouldn't call it unique, but was unusual in terms of this country, of that kind of torture. But the UN recognizes that brutality and psychological tactics during interrogations and holding prisoners is also a form of torture. So that kind of torture is more universal and is still ongoing in this city and across the country, particularly with young people who are so juveniles, who are so impressionable, and it doesn't take a whole lot of psychological torture to get someone to give a confession that in many instances is not the truth, and in many instances is fed to them by those very experienced detectives who know how to get confessions, and makes their life easier, obviously, Mike. If they get a confession, they don't have to go out and beat the bushes to find the evidence, the witnesses that might support their case. And that's why you get so many wrongful convictions that flow from confessions. And it's counterintuitive to the average person that, hey, a person would confess if they're innocent, if they didn't do it, but if they're coerced, or even if just a 13-year-old is told, you can go home if you agree to this, and so the child does that, and all of a sudden they laugh in his face, and he's prosecuted on that confession and spends decades in jail before perhaps a lawyer or an organization like the Innocence Project takes up his or her case and establishes the fact that the confession is false and coerced.
Well, Flint, I really want to thank you for taking this time to appear on the Live from the Heartland show once again. We've had you on many times. You've done great work, and I'm really glad to be your friend. And I do appreciate, on behalf of many other people, all the work that you and a whole lot of other lawyers, whether it be the People's Law Office or the Uptown People's Law Center, and a number of other people who are doing. There's insurmountable need on this front, and you're making a big start.
Well, thanks, Mike. And we just you and I got to keep keeping on as long as we get the energy and the wherewithal to do so.
Right on. So whatever you're doing, if you're still running or swimming, keep it up, brother.
You too. You
All
too,
right,
Michael.
everybody else, we hope you're doing good, and we're going to take a musical break, and we'll be back with more Live from the Heartland. Welcome back, all you citizens of the world. We're here with another interview for the March 23rd presentation of Live from the Heartland show. And the next guest is someone I've known for all of his life. I remember as a young fella, he was playing a guitar. He had it around his neck and was playing everywhere he went. And then one morning he said to me, "Hey, Dad, check this out." And he played Burning Ring of Fire. And that's when I had a sense that something was going on here. I've got a lot of musical people in my family, but Cadien Lake James, my youngest son, has been a full-time musician since before we took him to college, and then they left very shortly thereafter. Let me present to all of you the one and only Cadien Lake James. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, my father. Thank you for the kind words. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
I'm in Hawaii, and out there is the ocean, and there's just a lot of stuff to see. I've only been here about 20 hours so far, but you've been really active. Not long before I came out here, you went off to Bali, and then you went to Hanoi. You've had a beautiful review in the Aquarian Drunkard of your new album, Lake J and Dizzy, and you were on Chicago Public Radio. How about you take a few minutes, Cade, and fill us in on your most recent activities?
Yeah, well, I put out my debut solo record, Dizzy, under the name Lake J, which is just Cadien Lake James, it's part of my name. But put that out on the 1st of March. I've been working on it a long time, starting in the genesis of your attic over the pandemic when I was living there. So that came out on March 1st, and I happened to be traveling when that happened. I was filling in playing guitar for the band Whitney. They had a festival out in Bali, so we flew out to play that, and we're just going to Vietnam for fun afterwards. Had heard great things from other friends, and since we were going, a friend of mine, Kevin Morby, a great musician, had played in Hanoi in December. So I reached out to him to see about setting up my own show since I was going to be there anyways. And a lot of the gentlemen in Whitney played on my record, so they already knew the songs. Julian's been drumming with me for the last 3 or 4 shows I've done for Lake J in the States here. So yeah, we set up a show and played a Lake J set in Hanoi, which was a very special experience. And generally just had a good time kind of celebrating being together. And it was funny that my record came out that week and everyone who was on the trip had played on the record and contributed to it. So it felt like a little quasi celebration of the record coming out.
What was
So
your sense of Hanoi? I mean, for older folks like us, the Vietnam War, or as they call it in Vietnam, the American War, was a major, major event that, shaped the direction of many of our lives. And, all throughout your life, I've always tried to steer you toward the political, and you are quite a political guy, but you don't necessarily take my advice. And I know and I said, when you get to Hanoi, say this or that. And what was it like? What was your sense of Hanoi?
I mean, Hanoi was wonderful. It's as much as growing up in America much after the Vietnam War, but with the backdrop of that being obviously a huge point in our history, in recent history, which is coming up on the 50-year anniversary of America retreating from Vietnam. Uh, Obviously we all think about that, but it was pretty cool being there and realizing like it's not a it doesn't come across as a big deal to people there. I feel like the context of the Vietnam War, I think largely because they kicked our ass, is the sense there. It's like, obviously it was terrible and awful what America did invading Vietnam. But when we learn about it in school and just in media here in America, we do get the sense that we learn about how much of a point of contention it was in politics and in radical activism up against the war. But I don't feel like it's ever really hammered home to me how much like, yeah, we just like entirely lost that war. So that was interesting being in Vietnam and kind of getting a better sense for that and not feeling like, them judging Americans visiting probably not as big a deal for them because they're like, it's a point of pride that they won, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, let's go back to music.
Yeah.
You've had a lot of incarnations. I watched you grow up. You've been a guest on this show at various stages in your life with different groups. I remember when you and Hal, our engineer, family affair here today, had a little group called Teenage Dream. I remember when you produced a show at the No Exit with a band, I think, called Friends. You've played with other people.
Friend.
You went on. The music actually started in our basement, what we call a James Fort, with a group called Twin Peaks, which achieved quite a bit of notoriety. How about you giving us a little bit of your musical history leading up to your most recent project with Dizzy, the new album by you under the name Lake J?
Yeah, I mean, I started playing music as a high schooler, or before that really, but more regularly as a high schooler. My first bands were with Big Brother Hal, Hello Behind the Curtain Hal. Um, and I started playing with the guys in Twin Peaks in what was originally called Friend when we were 15, maybe something like that, sophomore, juniors in high school. And come going to college, we all did a semester and dropped out and got a record deal and started touring. And much of the first half of my 20s was uh, totally revolved around that band and commitment to that band. And it was really a special and beautiful thing to get to do in my early 20s. I feel like forever eternally grateful that I got to travel so much, focus on art, pursue creativity, spend time with loved ones, and collaborate with loved ones. It was really a special thing that we got to do with Twin Peaks, that I'm super grateful for. And we did it really hard. We toured at least 6 months of the year, if not up to 9 months of the year, pretty much 2013 until the pandemic. So it was a pretty brutal schedule, but it was pretty awesome things we did with that schedule. But pandemic came and we were all totally cashed and had, just burned 5, 6, 7 years of our lives on the road and kind of going nonstop, being in a rock and roll band, which was cool. So we decided to take a break indefinitely during the pandemic, which still going on. No plans to get back to it, but art and music is a part of all our lives. Connor's played some of the Lake J shows with me. Colin played all over my record. He's playing in the band Whitney. He's playing with Kevin Morby. Clay put out a great record under the name Hazel City, and Jack's played a couple shows with some friends too, and I know he still writes songs. So everyone's still making music, and myself spent most of the time since the pandemic working on this record, Lake J Dizzy, which was really fun and freeing. It's honestly been a really wonderful evolution of my musical journey as I'm on the air date here, March 23rd, turning 30. So it's been really cool getting to focus on making music for myself without any expectations about what it's meant to do for me, or any pressure for people liking it. It's just something I do because I can't help but to write songs, and it makes me feel good to spend times making little sonic worlds, so it's been a cool transition.
Well, we're here talking with Cadien Lake Jack Henry James is his full name. He's been going lately by Cadien Lake James. And for those of you who might have tuned in late, he is my youngest son. And I was really honored that I got to follow you young fellows around for a number of years, whether it be at South by Southwest, whether it be on the West Coast, whether it be Georgia, New York, South Dakota. I like road trips, and I really liked meeting up with you and hearing you guys play. Just one more little bit on what the pandemic did to you and perhaps to music and musicians, not only in Chicago but beyond.
Well, I haven't experienced so much the difficulties of trying to make it as a touring musician post-pandemic, given that I kind of took it as a sign to step away from it as my main source of income or career. But clearly it was a very difficult and trying time for bands and any artist who made their income or used as a source of their momentum and propulsion to perform live, because we couldn't do it for a long time. And it doesn't seem like there's been a total recovery for shows being as regularly attended, but it does seem like it's bounced back a lot. The other side of that is, inflation and the economy being a lot different, and show prices and paying for music is continually devalued to people, as we have things like Spotify that streaming services kind of make music feel totally accessible to everyone, which is on the one hand a really awesome thing, but everyone's very used to being able to listen to whatever they want at a very small price point. So when they're asked to pay for music or access to music, it's something they're conditioned not to do anymore. Whereas back in the day, if you wanted to hear the record, you had to buy the record, and that would directly support the artist. So obviously a lot's changed. We could spend an hour talking about that. But I will say it's, it seems like nothing's going to stop people being creative and making music. And music is one of the most special forms of art in the sense that it really ties people together through community. You can do that with any form of art, but music in particular revolves around this communal witnessing of people coming together to collaborate in this give and take between an audience or a listener and a musician. So it's onward.
Katie, and you write music and you write lyrics, and of course, all things change. And as you've grown older, there's been changes in your music. Can you kind of maybe perhaps mark the different periods of in your own life around what you were doing and what the sound was leading up to where you're at today?
Very difficult to distill like that in a simple way, but it's something that was cool for me working on this record is that a lot of my earliest demos, when I was first learning how to record on my computer, I would do a lot of sampling or taking breakbeat drums, which is a classic hip hop sampling technique of, grabbing a drum break from an old vinyl record and using that for your rhythm. So I used to do a lot of demos where I would make songs over drum breaks. I always really liked that sound, and I would sometimes sample other songs, and that's something that we never really explored in the music of Twin Peaks, but something that I think I explore a lot in the Lake J music, is kind of working with samples and making the drums sound like drum breaks and getting this kind of bombastic 90s sound that was just different and something I've always done and always kind of leaned into when I was writing songs for myself, but we would transform into the sound of Twin Peaks when we took my songs for that band. So it's been cool. It doesn't feel like it's something where I started listening to different music that was changing how you hear this record. It was kind of more just leaning into things that I hadn't been able to lean into as so much or present so much in my music playing in Twin Peaks.
Then tell me a little bit more about you got another thing going on besides Lake J and your new album Dizzy. You've got Kiwi, which is you every
House.
tell me what that's about. I hear it. Yeah, your mom is playing it, and you're on the internet, and I'm listening to another version of Cadien Lake James's music.
Yeah, Kiwi House is for the deep heads. That's some very odd music. It's I have a monthly radio show called Kiwi House that's aired on a internet radio station at beloved.wtf. I also archive them on my own website, kiwihouse.earth. But yeah, it's a monthly hour-long radio show of all original music. Sometimes feels quite intentional. Sometimes I throw it together because I say, oh crap, I got to get an hour of music in before the radio show airs this weekend. So it's been cool. I've been doing it. Was the 12th one. So I think I've done a year of Kiwi House now. So 12 hours of music out there. Sometimes it's demos of songs or, old pieces I have. Sometimes I'm making new ambient pieces. Sometimes it's experimental. It can really be all over the place. And all I could say is you should check it out if you ever have time to kill. It's a lot of music there. So head to kiwihouse.earth or go to beloved.w2tf. Either of them, you can find archives of Kiwi House and check out that side of my music.
Well, son, let me ask you, what kind of plans might you have around your new music with Lake J? Now that Dizzy is out, and I know the album, I know people have been buying it, although it's not delivered yet. And tell us a little bit about where that's going and maybe kind of your hopes for the future.
Yeah. So the record's been out 3 weeks now. I have a vinyl pre-order out. You can buy it digitally. Very much looking forward to the vinyl, but it'll not ship till the end of 2024 at the earliest. That's just how it can go sometimes. But I've been really glad to share music again and have it out there. And I don't have a ton of plans. I'm looking forward to making more music. Working on another record, going to continue doing Kiwi House. And whenever there's cool opportunities to play shows with people whose music I love or in a cool location, I'll do them as it sounds fun to me, but kind of moved on to a new era of music in my life where it's more of a hobby and something I do because I really enjoy it and not something I feel like I have to promote or have to do XYZ for, so just living, making music, enjoying life, and onward.
And I did see you had a show a few weeks back at the Empty Bottle,
Mhm.
and there was someone you else performing on the bill, and that person I believe was also on your album. You want to tell us about the
Yeah.
show?
Yuma Abe is awesome Japanese artist. I found out about his record because my favorite artist of all time, Hiromi Hosono of Yellow Magic Orchestra fame, Japanese artist, he mixed Yuma's first record and all of his other records too now. But found out about Yuma and we had connected over Instagram and became friends. And when I was working on my record, I asked him if he wanted to sing something on it because I had some space for something and just thought it'd be fun and cool. And he did and added a wonderful part to the song 10 to the Day. Um, and so I saw he was playing Chicago and I reached out to see if I could play the show with him so we could finally meet in person. And it was really, really wonderful show. It was great to, that was the first time I was playing Lake J music with people having heard any of the songs recorded. I just released the first single that week, so it was a fun experience, and people were perhaps a little more engaged than the first couple of times I played all these songs no one had heard with no way to listen to them afterwards.
Well, as someone who really put in 8 years on the road, still a young guy, and is still active, went through various incarnations. Do you have any advice to younger musicians?
Um, just play a lot. It's I think the most important thing with music is that you're doing it for the right reasons. And uh as with any art, it's like it can get muddied up when you are doing it because you want to be successful doing it. That's a recipe in life for disappointment or pressure. And the best art comes from joy. Uh, I really believe that. Or, it can be sadness, but it comes from emotion, not from a goal. Um, so I'd say, just if music makes you feel good and you desire to make music and to connect with yourself or other people through the medium of music, do it as much as you can. Play your instrument as much as you can, play with other people, uh, explore, that's just life in general though. Just follow emotion, I would say.
Well, son, it's always good to talk to you. Sometimes I don't see you as often as I like, but you always uh, you always make me happy when I chat with you about what's going on.
All power to the people.
That comes at the end of the show, but that
Yeah,
works.
but I said it right now.
You're the guy, son. And I'm not going to be there for your birthday, so I'm wishing you a very happy birthday. How old are you going to be now?
30 years old.
Happy birthday, Katie, and I'm so glad you came on the show. Everybody else, I want to thank Flint Taylor, who was also a guest on this show. I want to thank our engineer, your brother Hal James. I want to thank our co-producers, Katie Hogan, Tom Clark, and Lynn Orman. And we will be back next week with more Live from the Heartland. So everyone continue to do good in the world. The world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that we do together, and all power to the people.